This might be Putin's most pathetic act yet. The mighty Russian military is now relying on donkeys. Yes, actual donkeys, to keep this disaster of an invasion limping forward. If there were any illusions left about Russia's military strength, they're now trotting away on four hooves. Here's everything you need to know. Now, don't get us wrong, we're in no way mocking the donkeys, like many have throughout history. These animals have been laughed at, turned into jokes, and even slapped on postcards as comic relief. But here's the thing, donkeys have always done their job, no matter how brutal the conditions. They've earned their place in military history through sheer resilience. Even in the Ukrainian war, the donkeys are just doing their job. It's Russia that's making a fool of itself. But how do we know Russia's the real joke here? One word: Telegram. In the Russo-Ukrainian war, Telegram channels, while sometimes difficult to independently verify, have become the only real window into what's happening on the ground. No filters, no state-approved narratives, just soldiers, civilians, and military bloggers sharing raw footage and updates as the chaos unfolds. This time, the truth came straight from the source, the Russian soldiers. In early February, Russian Telegram channels were flooded with photos and videos showing donkeys being pressed into service on the front lines. Pro-Kremlin military bloggers posted footage of soldiers interacting with the animals, all while joking about their new teammates. One military volunteer and publicist, Zivov, couldn't hide his shock. The guys on one of the fronts were given a donkey for logistics. A real donkey, a statutory military donkey, Zivov wrote. He pointed out the absurdity of it all, recalling his own past jokes about using outdated tools in modern warfare. When I joked at the beginning of the SMO, Special Military Operation, about horses, bows and arrows and catapults, I probably wasn't joking, he said. And this wasn't just a one-off. Several other posts echoed similar sentiments, painting a picture of a military so desperate it's resorting to pack animals. But where are these donkeys coming from? Is it like Ukrainian farmers stepping up to help their military? You know, the kind of farmers who risk everything, who steal Russian tanks with their tractors and deliver food straight to the front. Those farmers that are risking their lives and livelihoods, pushing forward with determination in the face of absolute destruction. The short answer is no. The Russian donkeys aren't coming from any farm-to-frontline initiative. They aren't symbols of a nation rallying together. They were reportedly issued by none other than Russia's defense ministry. According to a widely circulated voice note from a soldier on the front lines, these donkeys were handed out as regular logistics vehicles, just like tanks or trucks, only less effective. The ministry hasn't publicly addressed this claim, but that hasn't stopped the story from spreading like wildfire. And it's not like the donkeys volunteered for the job. After all, the Russians are barely volunteering to join the army, and their enlistment payments were increased from 195,000 to 400,000 rubles from August 2024 to December 2024. That's over $4,000, and yet no one is exactly galloping to sign up. But the donkeys that had the misfortune of being drafted into Russia's war effort aren't there just for show. They have a very specific job to do. These animals are being put to work in logistics, transporting ammunition and supplies to the front lines, which conventional vehicles can't always reach. According to pro-war bloggers and Russian military sources, these donkeys have been seen ferrying essential materials to troops in need, playing a role that's become crucial to the survival of Russia's invasion forces. Now, if you know your military history, this won't surprise you in the slightest. During World Wars I and II, donkeys and their counterparts were the unsung heroes of heavy labor, carrying supplies across tough terrain, building roads and railways, and sometimes even acting as the first line of defense. Donkeys were particularly useful in places like the Philippines and Southeast Asia, where their nimble hooves could carry ammunition and supplies through dense jungle that machines simply couldn't handle. In World War II, mules and donkeys were essential in areas like the rocky landscapes of Italy, where their sure-footedness was unmatched. As the Allies moved up through the country, donkeys were used to haul supplies for the advancing troops. In exchange for confiscated animals, Italian farmers received military vouchers as compensation. The US military even had to ship mules from the west coast to the Pacific during the war. This operation proved perilous, given that Japanese forces sank 2 freighters filled with these poor animals, killing them all. Fast forward to 1958, when US President Dwight Eisenhower's Marines were in Lebanon. Guess what they needed to move their supplies into the hills? That's right, donkeys. They purchased them from local markets for as little as $5, equivalent to around $50 today, to help carry the equipment up the steep terrain. Though there's no mention of this use in Ukraine, at least for now, military donkeys have also been historically used for purposes beyond just transporting supplies. One notable example comes from the Gallipoli campaign during World War I, when a New Zealand medic, James Gardner Jackson, captured an incredible moment in history. A fellow soldier, Dick Henderson, was photographed transporting a wounded comrade to a field hospital on the back of a donkey. And Henderson's donkey didn't just carry one soldier, it helped save many others, becoming a symbol of sacrifice and service. This unwavering service is probably why donkeys are still used in present-day warfare. Take Afghanistan, for example. The country's rugged and mountainous terrain has made traditional transport methods nearly impossible in some areas. So in Afghanistan, donkeys are often the only means of transporting supplies and weapons when roads are blocked by floods or mountain passes become impossible. They've been essential for getting military resources to areas where no vehicles could go. But Afghanistan's use of donkeys is a necessity. The country's harsh geography demands it. What's Russia's excuse? Plus, Afghanistan never claimed to be the second strongest military in the world. Russia did, and yet here we are, downgrading from cutting-edge technology to hooved helpers. This remarkable downgrade, no offense to the donkeys, begs the question, how did Russia's war effort come to this, trading in tanks for hooves? Well, that's what happens when you're a little short on the former, or more accurately, when your military equipment is vanishing faster than you can replace it. Since the full-scale invasion began on February 24, 2022, Russia has faced staggering equipment losses. According to the General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces, the country has lost over 10,000 tanks and nearly 21,000 armored vehicles, along with almost 37,000 transport vehicles and fuel tanks. And that's just scratching the surface. The total losses reportedly include 22,923 artillery systems, 1,275 multiple-launch rocket systems, and nearly 25,000 drones. You can see where this is going. Without all that heavy machinery, Russia's logistics capacity is in shambles. Even by a more conservative estimate from Oryx, a Dutch research group that monitors the war in Ukraine, Russia has lost 11,769 armored combat vehicles alone. That's 8,887 destroyed and over 2,500 abandoned or captured. With such catastrophic losses, it's no wonder the Russian military is resorting to the humble donkey to carry out vital supply and ammunition transport tasks. The real question is, if the war continues at this pace, will the next batch of replacements be donkeys with a little more armor? Well, that's highly unlikely, even with all the jokes aside. After all, another reason why Russia is resorting to donkeys is its failing economy. The war in Ukraine has drained Russia's resources to the point where it's no longer a matter of just equipment shortages, it's about basic sustainability. With the economy cornered and heavily reliant on defense manufacturing, Russia is simply struggling to keep up. As the war enters its fourth calendar year, maintaining a fleet of modern military vehicles is increasingly difficult for the aggressor. Simply put, it's cheaper and more efficient to feed and care for donkeys than it is to maintain a fleet of tanks or armored vehicles. These pack animals can move supplies across terrain without the need for expensive fuel, upkeep, or spare parts. Meanwhile, Russia's dwindling resources make it harder and harder to sustain its military at full strength. So while armor-plated donkeys may sound far-fetched, the sad reality is that Russia's economy has forced it to choose whatever works, no matter how low-tech. Now, the reasons for Russia turning to donkeys are largely about necessity. However, we can't ignore the strategic advantages they might offer, especially in Ukraine's unique terrain. For one, there's the notorious Rasputitsa, the muddy season in Ukraine that has stopped armies in their tracks for centuries. As the frozen ground gives way to a thaw, field and roads transform into a quagmire, making it difficult for tanks and trucks to move. This seasonal challenge has repeatedly derailed military campaigns, from Napoleon's invasion of Russia to the Germans' ill-fated attempt in 1941. And it's been no different in modern times. After Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, footage of Russian tanks and armored vehicles stuck in the mud flooded social media, much to Ukraine's satisfaction. But here's where the donkeys come in. While motorized vehicles struggle in the muck, donkeys have a long history of navigating difficult terrain. They don't need paved roads to do their job. In fact, donkeys are perfectly suited to maneuvering through the rough, mountainous areas of eastern Ukraine, where tanks and trucks might get bogged down. But let's not hail donkeys as the ultimate war machine just yet. There are still plenty of challenges that come with relying on these pack animals in a war zone. First up, speed. Donkeys are certainly hardy, but they're not exactly built for speed. A donkey with a moderate load can typically walk at a speed of around 2 to 3 miles per hour. That's roughly the same speed as a human walking at a brisk pace. In other words, they move at a pace that could frustrate even the most patient commanders. Unlike modern military vehicles, donkeys can't rush supplies to the front lines in record time. If Russian troops were expecting these animals to provide quick logistical support, they might be in for a rude awakening. Then there's the climate. While donkeys might be able to navigate rugged terrain, they don't exactly thrive in a humid climate. The need to keep them in environments they can tolerate means that careful consideration of the conditions is a must. This means that Russia's plans could hit a wall if they're trying to make the donkeys work in a hot, swampy battlefield, where they're more prone to discomfort and fatigue than effectiveness. And let's talk about maintenance. As tough as donkeys are, they aren't self-sufficient. These animals need constant care, from grooming to health checks. In a conflict zone, where resources are scarce and mobility is restricted, the logistical burden of keeping donkeys in top condition could quickly turn into a nightmare. Russia's already stretched thin, so adding donkeys to the equation may be more of a logistical headache than a solution. That leads us to food. Donkeys consume a lot, and feeding them in a war zone isn't as easy as throwing them a few handfuls of hay. In a place where fuel, food, and water are already in short supply, ensuring a steady supply of proper nutrition for these animals can become another bottleneck. And let's be real, Russia is barely feeding its soldiers, let alone keeping animals well fed and healthy. The same goes for veterinary care. If a donkey gets injured or sick, treating it in a combat zone can be nearly impossible. These animals are far from invulnerable, and any illness or injury could put them out of action and waste valuable resources. And remember, we're talking about the same country that's been sending injured soldiers back into combat. Russia isn't exactly known for its compassion on the battlefield. Far from it. On January 18, 2025, a video emerged showing 2 Russian soldiers on crutches being sent towards the front lines near Novotroitsk in the Donetsk region. The video shows them struggling across the field, and it didn't end well for them. Ukrainian forces reportedly spotted them and eliminated them just 0.6 miles from their target using drones. But what's worse is that this wasn't a one-off. According to reports, Russia has been sending injured troops back into battle for months. They're not just putting soldiers with minor wounds back in the fight either. They're sending men who are literally disabled and require crutches to move. It's a level of disregard for human life that's almost hard to believe. A particularly alarming case involved about 50 soldiers from the 26th Regiment of the 47th Tank Division. These men, described as the remnants of 3 companies, had been treated for injuries but were sent straight back to the front lines instead of getting the necessary care. These disabled regiments, as they've been nicknamed, can be explained by the significant drop in Russian enlistment numbers we mentioned earlier. In the third quarter of 2024, only around 600 people per day were signing up. That's half the number of volunteers compared to earlier in the year. But instead of addressing why the war effort is losing steam and morale, Russia's response is to push broken soldiers back into battle. This is a sad reality for a country where human life, both civilian and military, is treated as expendable. And if Russia is willing to throw away its own people like this, what possible value could it place on the lives of animals? So it's no wonder that the photos and videos published on Telegram show Russia's donkeys kept in poorly built makeshift pens. However, all this hasn't stopped Russian politicians from framing the use of donkeys in Ukraine in a completely different light. Take Viktor Sobolev, a member of Russia's State Duma, as an example. In a Gazeta interview in early February 2025, Sobolev, a retired lieutenant general of the Russian army, didn't hesitate to defend the practice, even as unfortunate images of the pack animals went viral across military blogs. Apparently, to Sobolev, the use of donkeys was just another practical solution to Russia's logistical problems. He pointed out that there were very significant difficulties in supplying units and subdivisions with ammo and food. He boldly proclaimed, if some methods are used, including donkeys, horses, etc., to deliver ammunition and other supplies to the front line, then this is normal. And if we're to take his word for it, this isn't some last-ditch attempt to save face in the face of mounting military setbacks. No, Sobolev is unashamed of the practice. There's nothing wrong with this, he added, apparently oblivious to how ridiculous it sounds to use donkeys as a solution for something that tanks and trucks were supposed to handle. He even compared it to the Great Patriotic War, aka World War II, when Russia used horse-drawn artillery to carry its heavy loads. Yes, from horses in the 1940s to donkeys in the 2020s. Russia has come a long way. Sobolev didn't stop there though. He casually mentioned that dogs were also used in World War II. They were loaded with 2 mines and ran to where these mines were needed, Sobolev explained. Could this be a warning to Russian pet owners? Time to hide your dogs. President Vladimir Putin might be eyeing them up for the next recruitment drive. But what really stood out in Sobolev's defense was his questionable logic when it came to the value of life. He actually said, let them kill a donkey rather than people. Considering Russia has lost around 850,000 soldiers in roughly 3 years, these words aren't exactly shocking, and yet the sheer coldness of his statement is hard to ignore. Viktor Zavarin, another member of the State Duma Defense Committee, offered a somewhat less chilling perspective. He commented, let it work, let the donkeys help the victory. While his words aren't as harsh, they still reveal a troubling mindset. Donkeys, living beings with their own needs, are being reduced to tools for achieving military goals. But in a war where human life is already treated as expendable, it's hardly surprising that even animals are now being viewed as mere instruments of war. While Duma officials may try to frame the use of donkeys as a pragmatic solution to Russia's logistical struggles, the reaction in Ukraine is markedly different. Rather than taking the matter too seriously, many have opted for a more sardonic approach. As a result, Russian donkeys have become the subject of a barrage of satirical memes. In one, Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh is shown being mobilized for the war, because who better to represent the Russian military strategy than a perpetually gloomy, pessimistic donkey who's always a step behind? In another, a familiar graphic detailing Russian losses in the war has taken a peculiar turn. Normally, Ukraine's general staff releases this daily update, listing the losses of things like soldiers, tanks, aircraft, and submarines. But now, a new category has been added: donkeys. But believe it or not, even Russians are making jokes. A popular pro-war Russian blogger asked whether donkeys born on the battlefield would be considered state-owned property. The absurdity was underscored by questions like, if one is captured by an enemy sabotage group, will it be considered missing in action or a prisoner of war? We might not have the answers to these questions, but we do know one thing. The use of donkeys might be one of the strangest developments in this already chaotic conflict. Now back to things we don't know. We don't know how many of these animals are actually being deployed and how much of a role they will truly play in Russia's war machine. For now, it's simply unclear just how far this strategy will stretch. But what do you think? Do you find this new development puzzling or just outright troubling? With nearly 1 million soldiers lost, should we really be surprised to see donkeys filling in the gaps? And what's next in Russia's book of military desperation? There have been some rumors about camels. Let us hear your take in the comments section below.